welcome to yet another episode of Better Habits Show. And I have another great certified habit coach, Scott, with us today. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Lydia. I'm really happy to be here.
Yay. Scott, and we start with a quick intro. Please tell our listeners, who you are, who you help, what you help with. But I just want to say that Scott is I don't say old, but one of the old
OG, right? That's the polite way.
Exactly. They're one of the first coaches to join the platform and still with the
And
platform.
still on it, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm super honored, Scott, that you joined us today. Well, tell us, please, give us a quick intro, please.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Scott Maderer. I live in Central Texas with my wife. We're empty nesters, have an adult son, but he's successfully out of the house. Yes. And on his own, and at least hasn't boomeranged back yet. So we're all good. He works for a grocery store chain down here that's a really popular one called HEB. To the extent that like AGB actually has like a cult following in Texas. It's hilarious, but they're really powerful for the community. They do a lot of really great philanthropic work and community work and that kind of thing. So it's that's why people are so loyal to them. But anyway, I live in a relatively decent sized town now. I used to live out in the middle of nowhere, drove an hour to get anywhere, and now we're like 15 minutes from 4 grocery stores. So it's been a big change in the last year in our life. As far as coaching, I worked as an educator for about 16 years. After that, I transitioned and went into the corporate world, did that for about 11 years, kind of worked myself up into a senior executive position, kind of a job that everyone tells you, oh, this is the dream job, really high benefits and blah, 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 blah. And yep. And then realized, you know what, this is not what I want to do. So I started the coaching business on the side. My wife and I went through kind of our own journey of financial problems, suicidal thoughts, about lots of debt, big issues around finances. And when we changed our life, people started coming to us and going, y'all are weird. Can you kind of help us be weird? And that turned into coaching people sort of by accident. But then I realized that really was aligned with a lot of what I wanted to do, what I enjoyed about teaching, what I enjoyed about the corporate world, what the giftings that I best had. So I started doing more and more of the coaching, and then kind of reversed my climb up the corporate ladder, climbed back down, and launched a coaching business. And as you said, I've been part of Coachdotme since it was actually lift.do back in the days, pre name change,
Right.
and been part of it at that. I've been working with clients all over the world, both through Coach.me as well as through other ways where I reach out. I've worked with clients now in 20 countries and 38 states, over 1,000 clients. And I mainly work with people around time and money. That tends to be the two areas that people come for help with. It's that feeling of, I don't have any control over my money. Money comes in, money goes out, don't know where it goes, don't know what I'm doing with it. Or around time, it's that idea of, I'm always busy, but I don't feel like I'm getting the most important things done. I don't think I'm really doing what I'm supposed to do. And then that's kind of the areas and the habits that I work on is in those. And the funny thing is, time and money sound like very different, but actually from a habits perspective, from a mindset perspective, they're actually really similar.
and I have a lot of questions about that, because I think I was surprised first. Like, I know coaches who deal with time, and they're like productivity coaches or time management coaches, whatever they call themselves. And I know coaches who deal with money, right? We know those. They deal with, they help you with that, or they help you, build wealth, whatever. But, when I met you, you deal with both. And actually, when you look at them, like, I understand, because the way this is the finite resource, both, right? And you need to learn how to budget for it and track it, the spending, plan for it. So yeah, and tell me, just curious. So when I heard first, I puzzled, and not many people do this. But then, when I started thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense. I'm just curious how you came to this combination that is unusual.
By accident is how,
Sure.
I started with money. And what happened is, as I was working with people on money over and over again, I would notice that to help them really get control of their money, we actually had to address things that were going on in the time component. And eventually I transitioned to what I call a stewardship coach. So stewardship is time, talent, and treasures is kind of the buckets that people talk about. And my joke is, people think they have a time problem, they think they have a money problem, but in reality they have a talent problem, because
Oh,
it's not
okay.
management of time and money that's the problem. Those are just, like you said, they're a finite resource, they just exist. The
Right.
management is self-management.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it's the
yeah, yeah.
frameworks and the way you approach it that means that they're the same. It's the same
Mm,
reason why people will work with me on money. They'll come back after 6 months and they're like, I'm losing weight. Why am I losing weight? And it's like,
right,
well, because you don't think about it, but the way you're acting is different, and it
right.
spills over and affects other areas of your life. I think the same thing
Mm,
happens in reverse. I've heard of people that go to a health and fitness coach and then get better control of their money, and it's like,
mm,
why? These aren't the same thing, but they
right.
are, when you recognize that it's really the self-management piece that's the key. It's not that's why this whole thing of, oh, let me just find the
Right.
right app and it'll fix. No, it won't. Not unless you
Right,
fix
right,
you.
right, right. Like long time ago, and I was into productivity and time management, and exactly, I very quickly learned that it's about
It's
self-management,
self-management.
and a lot of this is non-logical. A lot of this is
Mm-hmm.
emotional, and managing your emotions and managing your impulses,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like with money, very often, like I'm an emotional eater and I'm an emotional spender. So the way I eat, when I'm stressed, when I'm nervous, I can eat stuff without noticing, and the same happens
Right.
with spending. So a lot of this is about learning how to manage,
Mm-hmm.
regulate, right? Self-regulate your emotions, how to notice things,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
even just
Tell us
putting
what
in
you think.
frameworks where you can think about things differently. So what I mean by that is, take a budget, for example. Everyone hates the
Right.
word budget, spending plan, whatever you want to call it. Again, you can do that around time, you can do
Yeah.
that about
I'm
money,
a
doesn't matter.
finance person, so I
Yeah.
don't hate it. I'm
Well,
sorry.
but tons of people hate that word. And here's why: they think of the word as telling them
Mm,
no. They think of a
right.
budget is a limit, it's telling me what I
Right.
can't do. And it's
Right.
actually
Right.
not. If you flip it on its head, a budget should be telling you what you do get to do. It's about
Yeah.
saying yes. And the problem is, so often we spend our time, we spend our money on things that aren't really important, that don't really matter. Because, like you said, we're not thinking about it. We're not taking that extra step of slowing down and going, wait, is this
Yeah.
actually where I should spend my time or my money? Is this really going to give me a benefit, not just in
Right.
the short term, but in the long term? Is this actually in alignment with my values or what I think is important or whatever? And when you don't do that step of putting in some frames or some processes to think that
Mm,
through, well, then you end up with the regret problem, which is, you spent the money's already gone, or you spent the time's already gone. And you look at the end of it and you're like, oh, that's really not what I should have done.
yeah.
Well, yeah, it's because you didn't put that extra step. And
Mm,
that's where the tool
right.
fits in. The tool is about creating that framework so that you can take that extra step,
Mm,
like you said, of plan, execute, review, reflect, revise, repeat, right? That's one of the frameworks that a lot of,
right.
and again, I don't care what habit you're talking about, it's the same concept, right?
Right. Right.
I got
Right.
a plan, I do something, and then I look at what I did, look at what happened, I think about what went
Mm,
right, what went wrong, I make some changes, I do it again. Do that over and over again, little by little by little by little by tiny little improvements. You're amazed at where you end up of. Those sorts of ideas of stopping and going, wait, what's the actual steps that I need to take? And then executing on them. That second part, the execution part, that's where, for a lot of people, they know it as a concept, but they
right.
can't execute on it because they haven't built that muscle yet. They haven't built that habit yet. And you've got all these other habits, emotional spending. It becomes a habit. It's every time I feel bad, I spend, I feel better. Well, of course, your brain is like, dude, go spend. I want to
Dopamine.
feel
Yeah.
better. And until you develop those new habits and those new frameworks and are able to put in a new pattern of behavior and build a new habit, which takes a lot longer and is a lot harder. And again, this is where the value of a coach coming in, because they can walk with you and go, hey, hold on. It's funny, but there is a difference between, oh, I've got to do this and nobody calls me out on it, and oh, I got to talk with Lydia tomorrow and tell her whether I did this. It's like just that simple act of I've got to type a message to Lydia or I've got to pick up the phone and call Lydia changes your behavior, because that's how we're wired. And then that lets us build those new frameworks, those new habits that allow us to really make big changes in our life. But they're not big changes like knock it out of the ballpark overnight. They're big changes built by those little tiny incremental things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because these are, I don't know, for some reason, we think we're supposed to be good at this because this is like, this is like.
Everyone knows how to do that.
Exactly. Versus, like, imagine you buy the gym membership, you go to the gym, you look at all those machines. You don't know, like you don't know how each works, what is the best way, how many reps, how many times, what is the rest, what is the right way to do this.
What's even the
So
right
what do you
form?
do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you do? What do you do?
So again, I think a
You
lot of
get a
times
personal trainer,
you go
right?
get a personal trainer, right? Yep.
At least for a while, to help you figure out with each machine, with each muscle, which was your plan, with your goal, figure it out, develop the plan that works for you and help you understand what each machine can do for you. With time and money is the same, but for some reason we have, and I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think for some reason with time and money, we don't think that way. We think, oh, or parenting, or I don't know, uh, um, other things. Like we think we're supposed to somehow know how to do these things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's a couple of things. One, especially with money, it's something that we don't talk about in a lot of our cultures.
Right.
It's kind of,
Right.
you never talk about sex, religion, politics, and money. Those are kind of the things that everyone says don't talk about.
Never
Polite
talk, never
society.
ask. Don't
Never
ask
ask.
about
Right.
it.
You're at work at a company, and most companies, even if there isn't a policy about it, there's sort of this unspoken rule that you don't ask other people what they make. None of that is normal conversation. That's one. Secondly, I think, again, it's tied up in our appearance factor. And this is now where time comes in. We all want to look like we've got it all together.
Yeah, we figured it out.
There's this whole thing of comparison. Everyone else looks like they have it together, so I've got to have it together. Right. And yet, by the way, nobody else has it together. They're all faking it too, but everyone kind of fakes it together. And there's almost this unspoken rule of none of us are going to call it out, but none of us have any idea what's going on. And that sort of behavior allows it to exist. And people feel like, all the time, clients will say, I'm probably the only person you've ever met that doesn't know how to do this. And it's like, yeah, that's why I have a business working with people on this topic. It's like, realize that's not possible, right? I've worked with 1,000 people, and yes, all of them are unique, but they're also different. And that's the cool thing is, they're all unique, but they're also all the same. I said different, but they have this idea of, there's nuances and there's things, you have kids, that one doesn't have kids. This is important to you. This is where you are in your life. Right. There's always those things. And yet at their core, it all comes down to, what's important to you? Where are you spending that resource? Right. How do you want to be spending that resource? How do we align those two? And then my job as a coach is sort of like the mechanic. You go into the mechanic with your car and you're like, it's making this funny noise. The mechanic's job is to figure out, for you, that funny noise is because of this. I need to fix that. For
Yeah.
somebody else, that funny noise, same noise, but it's caused a different cause. So we need to fix a different thing. And that's
Right.
kind of our job as a coach, is to come in beside and go, for your particular situation, here's some tools out of the toolbox that'll work for you.
Right.
And the tools are, again, they're the same, but they're also different. Even something as simple as a budget. If you're a couple, the way you work with your
Right.
money is different than if you're single. If you've got kids, different again. You got more than one kid, different again. It's all of these things. You're now an adult like I am. My wife and I, our kids out of the house. Guess what? We still have things that we're doing with our money now that wouldn't have been the same as if we were at this phase in our life and never had kids, because
Right.
that's just the way the life is. So
Right.
it's all of these little nuances that
Mm.
I think people overlook. And so they think, oh, this is a one size fits all. Everyone should be doing this. Everyone knows how to do it. I'm the only one that doesn't. And the reality is, none of us really, we don't get taught this. We just
Yeah,
kind of
I
absorb it.
actually want to ask. I want to ask you that question. A long time ago, I had an idea that in high school they teach us. I don't know. At least me, they taught us chemistry, biology,
Mhm.
astronomy, higher math. I mean, history, literature. I mean, so many things that honestly they were good, they were interesting, and
Mhm.
they increased my worldview and understanding. And I but at some point I was like, well, shouldn't they taught me other things like parenting, like psychology, right?
Mhm.
The child development. Because I have 4 kids, so for me it was like a little bit of uh, um, more into kind of
Yeah,
yeah,
practical
kids,
life skills.
practical, yeah, things that I need to know, the psychology, the development, this kids
Mhm.
development. And then things about the budget and money and management and time management. So I don't know, they do teach us, at least I don't know, probably country by country it
Yeah, different in
varies.
different places.
And yet I think it can be more practical. They could have, I think, at the some high school or early university,
Yeah.
have some of this mental health, mindfulness. I mean, these days, I think for sure that has to be part of the curriculum. And you've been an educator, so I'm sure you have a point of view on
Yeah.
that.
It's a, I think this is another one of those areas where it's a yes and a no at the same time, which is contradictory, I know, but I'll kind of explain what I mean. There's a degree to which the expectation is everyone's parents teach them that stuff. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, that is not true. Obviously, that is not realistic.
No,
First off, that's assuming the parents have got it all figured out, and maybe they
exactly.
don't. So there's that part. And then secondly, then with the school system, there's the thought of, okay, but what can we teach? What can we not teach? How much do we teach? How long? Do we keep the kids? All of these sorts of factors. And when do you do it? And could you even cover enough? Because all of those things that you just mentioned are vital, but that's like a whole, what, we do another 3 years of schooling,
Yeah,
and then teach it to. When do they
yeah.
get it? How do they get it? And so it's not a simple, it's easy to
Mm.
say, oh yeah, we should all have a class on that. But I mean, think about what you just said and how long would it actually take to teach a class on that?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not like
yeah.
it's a semester class. You don't learn all of that stuff in 3 months. And then the third factor is age appropriateness, and when is a kid or a
Mm,
young person capable of kind of putting this together.
yeah.
I've worked with kids as young as 10 or 12, and I've
Mm,
worked with all the way up through 60, 70, 80 year olds, everything in between. And there's different things that happen at different
mm.
phases too. So
Right, right,
what do we teach when? So it is one of those
right.
things where I wish we had it. I wish there was a way we could do it. I wish there was a system to do it. At the
Mm.
same time, I'm not sure how to solve the problem.
Okay,
It
okay,
takes someone
okay.
smarter than me to figure out the solution.
Okay, Okay, well, that's the whole different debate, but I just, I
Yeah, no,
just
it's a big one. I mean, in the US, there's a few states that have like a personal finance class.
there
It's
you go.
required in high school. The
There you
problem
go.
is that then you have a problem of, okay, so they require that class, but then what they teach in one school district or what they teach in another school district is really different.
Right.
How does that work? Is that okay? Is
Right.
that
Right.
fair? What?
Right.
So yeah, it's just a whole
Yeah.
another set of it moves the problem. It doesn't fix the problem, I guess is what I'm saying. It
Agree.
just changes it.
Agree. But I think, what we realize, we learn things, but then somewhere, often often when we're like in real crisis, like I'm
That's when we
sure
can't apply it.
majority of your clients come in when they're like, oh my God, I'm broke, or I'm in debt, or I live paycheck to paycheck. So, and then somewhere in their life, they hit the wall and they're like, okay, I need to figure this out. And that's when
Yeah,
they
they
they they
usually
go
have
to
hit
the
a
coach.
wall. It's not necessarily because a lot of my clients are actually very high income earners and often high net worth even, which everyone is always like, oh, they don't need a coach. It's like, no. They're actually the people that, believe it
Yeah.
or not, a lot of times hire a coach because it's exactly kind of what you alluded to a minute ago. When they reach what the crisis usually is when they reach a point of, okay, wait a minute. I feel like I should know how to do this. Nobody's taught me how to do this. I
Mm,
know I'm not doing it right. I need help. Now,
right.
sometimes that is triggered by I've got an overwhelming amount of debt. I don't know how to deal with it. Sometimes it's triggered by my wife and I are fighting about money all the time and we can't
Yeah.
come together about it. Sometimes it's triggered by, I make too much money to feel this broke all the time.
Right.
I
Right.
make $160,000 a year. How can I be struggling? And it's
Right.
whatever
Right.
it
Right.
is. So it's different triggers and they're not always a crisis, but the crisis is really more around that mindset shift of recognizing, wait a minute, everyone thinks that I should have this all together and know how to do it, and I don't.
Yeah.
Now again, when that happens, how that happens, different for different people.
Right.
But it is kind of that realization of everyone expects me to have this all together, and I just don't have it all together, and I need to admit to someone I don't have it all together and get some help.
Right. Right. Okay. So, um, you know, we at Coach.me, we are rooted in habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think both money and time is also in areas where we have strong habits, and
Absolutely.
they led where we are to the crisis because we just used to,
Mm-hmm.
something, and we don't recognize the pattern. So it's I think for you it's maybe often not introducing habits, but first unlearning some habits. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, like, what are some of the habits that people can, making this practical, right? People listening, making this practical. So what are some of the habits that people can start noticing and saying, oh, I need to do something about it? And then what are the some that we call keystone habits that people can start introducing, both in
Mm-hmm.
the area in the areas of money and time, that people can just introduce as these small things that can improve the situation.
So I'll give you a couple. So first off, with time and money, the first step always is awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us don't actually have a good grasp of where our time goes, and most of us don't actually have a good grasp of
Right.
where our money goes. So I'm going to take time first, and then I'll tell you how this
Sure.
applies to money because it's
Yeah.
really the same thing. It's just slightly
Yeah.
different execution. So if you think about awareness, I need to know where am I actually spending my time.
Mm-hmm.
That's as simple as setting an alarm on your watch or whatever that goes off every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour. I wouldn't do more than an hour. 30 minutes is about the sweet spot. And just jot down on a sheet of paper, what did you do during that 30 minutes? And just write the half
Right.
hours down the left-hand side of the page and do that all day long. Do that for a week. Do that for 2 or 3 days. Just do it for one day even.
Yeah.
And stop and look at it. And you don't have to write down, this isn't about keeping a detailed log and writing down every single thing and every minute or whatever, but it's just kind of capturing, oh, I scrolled on Facebook on this half hour and I answered a couple of
30
emails.
minutes.
That's it. 30 minutes, heck yeah, because that's what happens is people will tell me, I'll ask them questions like, well, how long do you actually spend on social media? How long do you spend
No, not
watching
much.
TV?
Not much.
How long do you spend? And that's exactly it. The answer is always, oh, not that long, not that long. And then they actually track it and look at it and they're like, oh, dear Lord, how am I spending that much time doing
Yeah.
fill in the blank? And there's
Mm.
always a blank. It's different for different people, but
Yeah.
there's always things that they're these invisible time sinks. And it's exactly what you said. The reason they're there is they're the habits. They're the
Right.
things where you've got a cue, and maybe it's I'm stressed out. So I go scroll Facebook for a few minutes looking for that quick dopamine hit of, oh,
Yeah.
look, there's a cat video, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you've built that up and your brain has reinforced that behavior and it's unconscious. You don't even realize you're doing it. And so
Yeah.
you're blind to it. And so with money, that can be as simple as jotting down, what did you spend money on today?
Yeah.
And even maybe just taking one area, like the money you spend on food out of the house, walking around. So I'm not even worried about groceries and all that other, just eating out and buying snacks and all of that sort of stuff. I pick on that one because that's one of the most
Mm.
common blind spots. People will say, oh, I spend, $50 to $100 a month eating out. Then they track it. It's like $600, $800.
Yeah.
Where does that all go?
Subscriptions that
Subscriptions is
are
another big one. Yep.
automatically taken from your card.
Especially if they're
You don't even
annual.
know.
Especially if they're annual, if it pays every month, a lot of times you're a little bit more aware than if it pays every, once a year or once a quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another
Yeah.
big blind spot. There's a lot of things where just stopping and putting in some awareness tools where you get a
Mm.
chance to see where it goes
Right.
already naturally starts to change some of your behavior
Yeah.
because all of a sudden you're looking at it.
And I totally agree. And we'll jump into the good habits, the keystone habits. But before we go there, Scott, I'm just curious because I was a productivity coach for a
Mm-hmm.
while, and I helped my client, be more productive, right, with their time, be it procrastination. Now, I felt, or I experienced resistance
Oh
from
yeah.
clients to tracking. Did you experience that? Do you experience that? How
Yeah,
do you
you
deal
do.
with that?
Sometimes some people do, and it's okay. If that's not where you want to start, I mean, there's definitely places you could start other than that. There's other threads
Mm.
that you can grab a hold of.
Like this
The
is the best,
the
right? I
reason
mean,
I put it out there as the best and encourage people to do it is because you can't fix a problem when you don't know what the problem is,
right.
And again, your brain fools you. You are
Mm.
blind to it. And it's not because you're a stupid person. It's not because you're weak willed. It's not
Mm.
because you don't have enough willpower. Other people just must have more willpower than me. Or, you hear all of these things. And it's like, no, that's not what it is.
Mm.
It's brain chemistry, it's brain wiring. Your brain gets hardwired into these loops. And so
Mm.
what I have found is explaining that to people and explaining that blind spot, especially a lot of times if I can catch them with one. And here's what I mean. If I'm talking to somebody real time, where I'll just ask them, like, hey,
Right.
what did you do for the last 30 minutes, and even just get them to reflect on the immediate,
Mm.
and they go, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I was just doom scrolling right before I got on, to talk to you or whatever.
Mm.
The minute they can see that and recognize that if
Mm.
I wouldn't have asked you
Yeah.
that question, you would never have thought about that. 2 hours from now, you would have forgotten that you spent an hour doom
Mm.
scrolling. And that it's that awareness key that makes them a lot of times open to the idea of,
Okay.
hey, okay, I'm not actually spending my time where I think I should.
No, I agree. You're right. I call the time diary and the expense
Mm-hmm.
diary, I call it the lie detector because it's hard because you start noticing things, and
Mm-hmm.
um so sometimes I felt like some of my clients had the resistance to do that because they were afraid of what they're gonna see.
They don't want to get called out on their lie, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
And sometimes that means it could even mean that they're just not yet really
Mm,
they're engaged enough to know that there's a problem, but they haven't yet transitioned to wanting to fix it. And
right,
again, that's okay. That's not a
right.
bad thing. That's guess what? I've got things in my life that I can say that's true about.
Yeah,
But it's about helping them recognize, okay, then what are you actually trying to change? What is the one? And for them, maybe it is just a small area or a small habit, and it isn't
yeah.
yet the whole fixing the, okay, great, let's work on that. And then what I've discovered is a lot of times once they start seeing some success in one
Mm,
area, then they're more open to,
right,
oh, okay, maybe I can look a little deeper now because I believe I can fix it. They've
right.
got to borrow that belief and borrow that hope because a lot of times they don't believe that they can fix it. They haven't bought into the idea because they probably tried a lot of other things.
Yeah,
Oftentimes people will come into coaching and it's like, I've tried everything else, so I'm going to give this one a shot. I know it's not going to work. And it's like, well, wait
yeah,
a minute,
yeah, yeah.
and yet
No,
coaching has a better
I
success rate for a lot of
Ex-
people.
Exactly. I've heard that a few times, and my response to that, well, you must have at least a tiny bit of belief that you can change it, otherwise you wouldn't be
You wouldn't
here.
be here, right?
So you here, that means you still believe that you can make it. So even if it's a small, tiny,
Yep,
piece of hope, let's hold on to that and let's move forward. So I love it.
yep.
Thank you. I love it. So you're saying, okay, maybe if something feels if they feel resistance, if people feel resistant, yeah, reduce. Basically,
Reduce
that's
it.
what we do with habit. Reduce. Okay, let's track one category of expenses,
Right.
right? Or let's
You can't
let's
brush your
track
teeth
the
twice a day.
morning.
Okay, let's just brush it once a day, or let's brush one
Exactly.
tooth or whatever.
There you go. Reduce it
That
to ridiculous,
sometimes to
ridiculously
ridiculous
small.
levels. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it will need to be. That's why coaching is so powerful because we throw in ideas out here, but each person will
Mhm.
benefit from different, for some people this will work, this thing will work, for other people something else will work. So that's the
And it's
power.
also even where some people will make faster traction, quote
Mm,
unquote, and make bigger changes quicker. Other people, it really is little bitty tiny change. That's what they need. Because again, some of it has to do with things. It may have to do with things that happened to you when you were 6 years old,
yeah,
and I'm not a therapist, can't necessarily go back and unpack all of that, but the reality is that's you. And so my job as a
yeah.
coach is to kind of meet you where you are and go, okay, let's go to the next place. And
Mm,
and not judge, oh, Lydia made this big change. Awesome. She's a great client. Oh, Tom just made this little bitty change. Oh, he's a terrible client. No, Tom's an awesome client too, because that's the
right.
change he made with the baggage he was carrying. And that's the change you made with the baggage you're carrying. Everybody's different, and yet everybody's the same. So it's that weird
Right.
paradox that we have as coaches
Yeah, yeah.
of working in
And
that
also
weird space.
knowing, as coaches, knowing um the behavioral science
Yep.
behind the change, behind the habits, understanding the stages, understanding that it
You're
takes
going to self
time.
sabotage
Yeah,
sometimes. You're going to
understand. Yeah,
do, yeah,
there you
all of
go.
these
There
things.
you go. And that's again, I keep coming back. The benefits. Because everybody is like, oh, I can buy a book. I can do it by myself. Well, um, yeah, there are great books out there on time. There are great books on money. There are great books on many topics. And does it mean that everybody in the world is great with time, is great with money?
No. And
So,
keep in mind that generally most books are written for a specific kind of reader. And here's what I
right.
mean. A lot of books aren't written with the idea of what I call frameworks. They're written with a specific process. difference is a process is, works well for people that fit into a certain, box, because you got to kind of start in the same place and end in the same place for a process to work. Where a framework is more of a, like I talked about earlier, where I said plan, execute, review, reflect, revise, repeat. That's a
Right.
framework because I can apply that framework on a lot of different levels. I could talk about planning my day. I could talk about planning money. I could talk about planning health. I could talk about planning meal. There's all sorts of things that you can do that framework on. And one of the dangers of a lot of books is when they're written from a process-minded perspective, if you don't fit into the right box for that process to apply to you, then you get even more frustrated because you feel like, oh, I must be the problem. And it's like, well, no, actually
Right.
not. The book wasn't written for
Right.
you, but you don't have any way of knowing that. Where a coach can do some diagnosis and go, oh, that process isn't going to help you because of XYZ. We need to use a different process and transition to something else.
Exactly. And I want to totally agree because and there are various categorization,
Oh, yeah.
various typology, various psychotypes. So there is no one, right? And
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are on all those um, scales, right? In terms of, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
extrovert, introvert, the DISC assessment that you, Scott, do,
Myers
I know.
Briggs, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's so many scales and assessments, and depending where you are on all of these
Mm-hmm.
different assessments, some tools are going to be totally
Right.
useless for
Mm-hmm.
you, and some tools are going to be like, oh my god, like this is what I was looking for my whole life. And I think with the coach, what you're saying, with the coach, um, you know, he can diagnose you or
Right.
assess you and put you in the right bucket and offer you the tools that might work for you better. So you don't have to go through the, like, I tried this
Experimentation.
tool,
Mm-hmm.
this tool, and this tool, and another 100 or 1,000 tools before you figure out the one that actually works for you.
Right. Exactly. That's the goal of a good coach. And it's why,
Mm,
we talk about keystone habits. We talk about
right.
the small things, like in time. Okay, just picking one area and how do we improve this one area? Maybe it's bedtime. For a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, they actually
Yeah.
want to improve their mornings. And one of the ironies is you do that by improving your evenings, which a
Right.
lot of
Right.
people lose track of. And so it's how can we improve your evening so you can improve your morning? And that's a keystone area for is evening routine, morning routine kind of frameworks for
Yeah.
time. And for money, again, a lot of times it's around those impulse spending behaviors. How do I, and that sometimes is as simple as carry cash, which sounds hilarious, but cash has an immediate tangibility to it that for a lot
Yeah.
of people creates a friction that they stop and think. It
Right.
just, and that's really all we're trying to do is stop and
Yeah.
think. Um, and so when we do that, when we look at things like that, but even there, does that mean cash works for everybody? Absolutely not. Or does it work in every area? Absolutely not. Same thing for the time. We could
Mm.
talk about morning and evening routines. There are people that it's like, oh no, we're not there yet. We've got to work on something different because there's so many other dominoes that have to fall
Mm.
to get to that point. And that's where, as a coach, sometimes it's about asking those questions and going a little deeper and going, okay, wait a minute, what have you tried before? What's held you back before? What are you seeing? And I think a lot of times for ourselves, when we're trying to do it ourselves, it's almost like we don't trust our own we don't trust what we see about ourselves, kind of for good reason, because we lie to ourselves. And then we also,
Mm-hmm.
and by the way, lie to ourselves doesn't always mean that we're seeing things worse than they are. Sometimes we're seeing things better than they are. And sometimes it's worse. We do both. We'll tell ourselves, oh, I can never get to bed on time. Really? Why not? What does that even mean? What is how does that, how did you come to that conclusion? Or we'll tell her, well, I'm just not a morning person, so I can't get anything done in the morning. Really? What does that mean? And
Mm.
yet we'll also lie to ourselves with the, oh, I don't spend much time watching TV, and
Yeah.
then you actually look at it as like 18 hours a week or whatever. It's we lie to ourselves in such
Mm.
bizarre ways around time, around money, around all of these decision making things that and that's where again having somebody that can sit outside of us and isn't emotionally attached to it, you know whether or not you
Yeah.
go to bed on time does not affect my identity. It doesn't affect whether or not I go to bed on time affects me, but whether or not you go to bed on time. And I don't mean that doesn't mean I don't care as a coach. It just means at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it doesn't affect me. It really doesn't. So I can look at it more objectively and from outside. Again, it's back to getting use health is the perfect example. You get a physical trainer, guess what? They really aren't tied emotionally to whether or not you get in shape. I mean, that doesn't affect their life, but they are the one that a lot of times can help motivate you to do it because they
Yeah.
can come in and go, hey, by the way, this is going to take a while and here's why,
Yeah.
or hey, it's not just about lifting, it's also about how you eat and all these other things, just like we all do.
But also, many people told me that they even even when they very well know
Mhm.
what to do, they're a newbie in the gym, they know what to do, they know how to do it, and yet they still hire a
They still,
personal
yeah,
trainer for accountability purposes. So like one of the big things, and I think it applies obviously with the time and money, and any other form of
absolutely.
coaching,
Any habit.
um, the accountability part is just knowing that you
Mhm.
need to, someone is waiting for you to report whatever, report time, report money, come to the gym, whatever habit you need help. It just increases the chances you doing this.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
a
know,
social cue.
significantly.
We are, again, it's kind of why we talked about not talking about time and money, because it's the thing that we think everyone has together. It's
Mm,
sort of the same, it's almost the same and opposite. When we do actually open up to someone, there's a degree to where it's like, okay, wait, now I actually have to improve because
yeah,
I'm telling someone this is important to me. I actually have to follow through.
yeah.
It's a weird social cue that we have around
Mm.
accountability. And what's powerful about that too is, accountability has this kind of negative ramification, or it's almost like a dirty
Yeah,
word in some circles.
yeah,
And yet, if you really think about what it means, all it simply means is telling someone you're going to do something and then actually doing it. That's really all it means. And when you think about it that way, it's like, well, wait a minute, that that's not bad. That's like what mom and dad probably told you to do when you were growing up, right? For most of us, at least, we were raised with that idea of if you tell someone you're going to do something, you do it. That's all it is. And as a coach, the cool thing is we get to see it. And sometimes, accountability means being a cheerleader. Get back on the horse. You can try do it one more time. Sometimes it means, smacking them upside the head nicely, and saying, yeah, hey, you don't want to do that, then let's get that out of the house, or let's,
yeah,
how can we put a framework around this where you won't go into that bad habit, uh,
yeah,
go back to time, getting up in the morning, move your alarm clock to the other side of the room, where you have to get out of bed to go turn your alarm clock off. Little
mm,
things that don't sound that big. And it's not the information that changes, it's the execution. If it was
mm.
just knowing what to do, Google would have solved all our problems years ago. you know,
Exactly.
and AI would, go ask Chat GPT, it'll give you all sorts of information. Sometimes it's even true. You know, and
Yeah, yeah. Well,
information isn't the solution, it's the doing.
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch on this, as we're wrapping up our conversation. I hear from, my friends, like, oh, I just, I didn't know what to do, or I had a bad moment. So I talked to ChatGPT.
Hmm.
I talked, and, and
Yeah,
I'm
I'm better.
good. He told me what to do. And I'm like, like, I mean, let's hear from you, and then I'll say what I think. Like, what are some of the dangers? Let's just tell people what are some of the dangers of doing this with AI. It doesn't matter which one. And what are some of the benefits doing it with a real person?
The two things that I'll say, so first off, I use AI. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I'm not, I'm not one of these
Not
burn it all
yet.
down, at least today. Talk to me tomorrow. I might change my opinion, but it's got benefits. At the same time, realize that it is set up and programmed and trained in a very particular way. And so, as an example, ChatGPT is literally taught to not contradict you. That's part of its programming, is to literally kind of reinforce what you already tell it you think. So once it started learning how you think, it starts reinforcing that thinking, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
because that's how they programmed it. And that could be a good thing and that could be a terrible thing depending on what you're thinking. And so there's actually some cases now of people that have, mental health issues or other things going on, that then go down that AI rabbit trail, and it reinforces negative thought patterns as
yeah,
opposed to challenging them. Now, that can, by the way, actually happen with a human coach. So it's not that that can never happen with a human, but it is where getting a good coach and asking questions about what's your coaching framework, how do you approach it, how many clients have you worked with, looking for testimonials, all of these other cues that we can use to validate that you're working with the right coach or a professional coach, or trained. And it's not
mm-hmm.
just about, do they have a certification? That's an indicator, but that's not the
Yeah,
only indicator. But are you working with someone that can know the difference between, here's where I want to lean in and reinforce that thought pattern, here's where I need to challenge that thought pattern, or
yeah,
here might even be where I need to bring in another, you need to go talk to somebody else, and
yeah,
maybe a therapist, maybe a specialist of some sort, tax specialist or whatever. This is beyond
yeah,
what coaching is, and it goes into a
yeah,
different area. AI, at least currently, doesn't yet have those sorts of barriers and frameworks and abilities, in large part because it's trained on models around language, not
mm-hmm.
it's not yet a human.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't yet have that emotional intelligence and that ability to read between the lines and keep asking more nuanced questions to figure out that real nuance. Now, again,
Yeah,
10 years from now, that may be a completely different picture than it is today. But today, I don't think AI yet
yeah.
replaces, it can supplement, but it can't replace dealing with a human coach.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I read a post on LinkedIn today from a guy who's building communities, and he had a really good comparison, why AI is great to,
Mhm.
to analyze information, to structure information. I mean, there are a lot
Great
of
tools for
ways.
those things. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, great ways. But in terms of this conversation in inquiry, asking deep, asking, challenging questions, and reading between the lines, and and especially if we're doing a live coaching, where the tone of voice, your body
Body
language,
language. Yep.
you know your um the way you say it, the whole
Tone, all of that. Yep.
the whole experience. And I think it's easy, like your point to that the AI is trained to tell you what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds so good that you're like, oh my God,
Makes you feel better.
Exactly,
But it
exactly,
may not fix the problem.
exactly. And it might even, yeah, it might be dangerous. I
Well,
see, I see cases where it can be pretty dangerous. So
absolutely. It's
yeah.
it's take the scale of, if you go on Facebook, right? And you tend to only have certain people in your
Mhm.
circle, in your community, and
Yeah.
politically, socially, morally, whatever, you have filters, and you
Yeah.
allow some friends into your circle and not others. Facebook then goes, this person kind of does this, so I should feed them information that
Right.
reinforces that belief. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
It's got a certain inherent bias. Well,
Agree.
chat GPT and all of these other language models have similar for two reasons. One, they're trained off of large data sets which come from biased information. Some
Mm.
of that bias is inherent in the data set. And then secondly, it then is given that kind of
It
command too
learns.
of give me
Yeah,
the
from
echo
your
chamber.
interaction.
I
Yeah, yeah.
interacted with you in a certain way. Oh, you must be a fill in the blank. I'm going to reinforce fill in the blank. And it literally, again, that happens in Facebook, that happens in YouTube, that happens in
Right.
all of those social media channels. It's still happening with AI. But we don't yet, I don't think people are recognizing it yet in AI as the fact that can, especially if you're unaware of it. That's the other problem. If if you know that Facebook feeds you up things that you already agree with, well, you might hopefully have the wherewithal to then go, maybe I should go check out some alternative information.
Yeah.
Hopefully you actually then do it. But, I know most of us don't, but, let's be honest. Same thing for AI. If it feeds you something, you can challenge it even and say, okay, now tell me the counterpoint. And you know what?
Yeah,
It'll do it.
you can
It'll
do
tell
that.
you, it'll argue against itself. And it's like, well, then how do I trust,
There you
the
go. And
information?
and that's the thing. That's the thing with AI. It gives you something, and then you say, well, what if the opposite is true? And then, yeah, sure.
It's like, yeah, opposite true. That's fine. I'm good.
Like it would never contradict you. That's
Mhm.
you're totally right. And with the good coach is gonna,
At
say
least ask more
no,
questions, or, at
ask
least dig in a little
questions.
deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, and say, hey, and refer back to,
Right.
refer back to data, refer back to, your previous experience, and just
Open you up
challenge
and
you.
show you some contrary information and go, well, how do you
Absolutely.
work this into the worldview that, or the
Right,
belief
right,
that
right,
you have?
right.
Ask you, why do you believe that?
Yeah,
Whatever. They're going to dig in deeper. It's not just going to be a surface echo response, hopefully.
absolutely,
Not if they're a good
absolutely.
coach. I will not, by the way, I am not saying that not all coaches will do that, because
Yeah.
unfortunately they won't. It is why it's good to work with a coach that's been around a while, because it isn't something I know. When I was early as a coach, I did not do a good job of that. I will
Mm,
freely admit to that. I wasn't as good at
mm,
coming up with ways of challenging someone's thinking, but doing it
mm.
in a way that doesn't just shut down the conversation.
Right.
Because there's a difference between go, oh, you're an idiot, that's stupid. That doesn't work real well. No one wants to hear that. But how do you actually get someone to challenge
Yeah,
their own framework or their own thinking or their
yeah,
own worldview or their own belief? And by
yeah,
the way, it doesn't matter whether I agree with you or not, even. I've worked with people that politically, socially, whatever, I don't, I would, it's not somebody I would be personal friends with, or believe
mm,
they're right about everything. But yet, how do I still work with them and respect who they are, and hold that judgment free space and all of those things? That is something that, as a coach, that's the skill that takes you to another level when you can start
no,
doing that.
absolutely, absolutely. I agree. I agree. All right. Well, as we wrapping up, I want to mention your book, Scott. Um, give us a yeah. There you go. Give us a
Inspired living.
quick intro, and I just want
Sure.
to inspire folks to get a grab to read the book.
So Inspired Living is the name of the book, and the subtitle is Assembling the Puzzle of Your Calling by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures. And we talked about books earlier. Well, I took a framework approach on purpose because of exactly what I was talking about earlier. I didn't want to write a book that was just one process. Everyone did the same thing, kind of thing, and you had to be in the same spot to work. So instead, I took the thought of what are some frameworks that, regardless of kind of where you are in your walk, will help you unpack these areas of time and money and talent, and which is leadership, communication, those sorts of things, and examine them and then begin to make some shifts. So it isn't a cure-all book. It's not meant to change, everybody and fix everything. But it is one of those things. I truly believe that if you're at a point where this is something that you want to work on and you're looking for a good resource to kind of get started, I think it's an excellent get started book. And you can find out more information about it at inspiredlivingbook.com.
Cool. And then, before the very end, like what could be, because then we talked about it a little, but what could be some of the triggers? Like how do people know, oh, I need to go and read that book, or I need to go and talk to Scott about time, treasure, or talent? Give us just a few
Usually the
of the
triggers are
triggers.
one of two. So for time, the feeling is usually I am way too busy, but I'm not actually doing the things that are important to me, the things that matter. I've had people come in and go, I'm not going to my kid's soccer game. I'm working all the time. That could be an example of that.
Right.
This is important to me. I'm not able to spend my time there because I'm spending my time in other places. And with money, it's a similar idea. It's more often than not, it's I make too much money to feel this broke. I can't.
Right.
So it's not necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, but that it's just that feeling of every time I look up, something else has happened. How is this always the unplanned thing? How is everything always sneaking up on me? Right. It's the difference between unplanned and unexpected. We can actually plan for unexpected things, but we forget that. And that's happening usually in time and money. So it's really the same emotion. And then my joke is people usually don't come to me because they think they have a talent problem. They come because of the time and money problems, and then all we work on is talent. So
okay. Cool. What I'm hearing is the feeling of control, right? Like I don't feel like
I'm a little out of control.
How do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? At least what I'm hearing, and
absolutely
it manifests in these different situations. But honestly, is like it feels like I should be doing this, but I'm actually doing that, and that means I'm not in control.
Yeah, out of control, feeling loss of control. Those are big indicators as well around time and money.
Cool. Well, Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful conversation as always. And folks, you find all the links to the book and to Scott's Coachdotme profile down below. Jump in on the discovery call and see where you are in terms of the time, money, and talent.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Scott.